Hey everybody, it's Dan, and I am back. No Lindsay today. She is off in Hawaii having a little fun with the fam. But I have to tell you, I'm super excited because we have a wonderful guest joining me to discuss an important topic, one that, let's face it, we men get mocked and ridiculed about a lot. But it's one that we nonetheless need to talk about and bring into the light. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, June is Men's Mental Health Month. And it is important that we have discussions about that and raise awareness about the issues because, sadly, on average, over 100 men a day in the U.S., and that's 100 men each and every day, unalive themselves, which is roughly 4 times more than women. We're not trying to make light of any of the women who do that too, but it's an important consideration to have. So I was really excited to reach out to my guest who's been on my podcast with me before, and I've been on his, and have him come in and talk about this issue and why it's so important. And I'll bring him on in just a moment, but his name is Dr. Todd Bottom. He's a community psychologist, a researcher, a men's rights advocate, and the author of a couple of books. One is, I highly recommend, by the way, is Confessions, a Raw Chronicle of Fatherhood in the Age of Absence. If you really want to hear about that, go check out the podcast that Todd and I did. And then his latest one is called Rules of Engagement, which is a guide focusing on emotional sovereignty, relationship dynamics, and men's identity. I'll let Todd explain that more in a bit. And he's going to discuss with me the issue of men's health and some of the struggles we have. So without further ado, if I did this right, Todd should be on the screen now. Hey, Todd, how are you?
Thank you for the invitation.
So how was that intro, by the way? You like that one?
It was great. Not as good as the first one you did for me. I think this one was a little short. So,
well, we're live, so
no complaints at all, though. Not one bit. Thank you very much. It was very, very generous of you.
Well, I'm so glad that you did agree to come on the show because this is a really difficult topic. I will be, as you and I were talking off air, I'll be surprised if it holds up on TikTok because they don't like us talking about this. But it's something that does need to be discussed and really, one of the things that makes me sad is just how, like I mentioned in the open, how well on average over 100 men a day unalive themselves. And as bad as that is, that's a fraction of what's really going on, right? There's a lot of mental health issues out there that men are dealing with. We talk about it often on this show. So we're going to dive into it. But before we do, why don't you go ahead and just give the audience a little flavor of what you do and who you are and what you're all about.
So a little bit of background. Let me go back to, let me set it up because I'm sure a lot of guys, your viewers can resonate with this. So just a little bit of context. In my early 30s, was divorced after an 11-year marriage. I had 3 little daughters at that time. They were ages like 1 to 6, 1 to 7, something like that. I was blindsided, like a lot of guys are, lost in a small town, didn't know what to do, had no answers. And as you know, Dan, 25 years ago, there were no resources online. There was no YouTubes. There were no anywhere. So it really affected me for a long time. After that marriage, I went back to college and finished almost immediately, went back and worked on my bachelor's degree and got that in psychology. And it was during that time I was asking questions like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why is everybody, like, why do I keep doing everything wrong? Why is everything I do wrong? Why do people? And then I started asking a question, what is wrong with everybody else? So it was during that time when it really started to form. And that's when my eyes really started to get opened really wide. I was like, oh, I didn't know all of the Pandora's box. And after I started to realize, I was very naive. I was a little small town Northern Illinois boy. And once that box was opened, there was no closing it again. So I actually made a part of my my doctoral research I did on the outcomes of divorced fathers, and so that's when it all really snowballed. Over the years, I just started to get more and more angry, more and more surprised, even. So these last couple of years, I've really wanted to take my knowledge, my experiences. I was like, I know that there's so many guys out there that need resources. They need conversations. They need to know that it's not them. So yeah, more recently, just like a year and a half ago or so, I was like, you know what? I've got a story. Let me publish it. And that's Confessions that Dan had mentioned. I was like, there's so much more that I can have to offer. So I started.
Let me shamelessly plug it for you. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. We can talk about that a little bit more. And so yeah, so but that was about a year and a half ago, and about 1 year ago is when I started my YouTube channel, and I'd wanted to do it for years. And finally, I said, you know what, Todd, you're not getting any younger. Do it. You got a wealth of knowledge, information, and a little bit of an insider, not knowledge and understanding of how all of this works now, having gone through my doctoral studies and all. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. On my channel, I talk a lot about men's issues. It's a very research-based database and things like that. So I don't know if that conceptualizes everything well enough, but that's a little bit about me.
I think you covered it pretty well. And, just again, I want to help you out here. That's part of the reason why I have you on, is that I really encourage people to go check out Todd's channel, because what I love about it is we talk about the same things, but we come at it from a slightly different viewpoint, right? You're more analytical, I think. I mean, I do it, but you're much better at it than I am, and you bring the facts, man. Right? I mean, you don't just say something, you back it up, and
Yeah.
back it up 100 times more than I do. I back my
Yeah.
stuff up, but what I love about it is, and I've told you this before, is I use your videos for research for me, right? Because you
Oh, yeah.
provide so much information that I'm able to either use that directly or use what you're using and go dig a little deeper myself so that I
Yeah.
get educated. And it's something that I try and relay to people, because, one of the things that we have to deal with as men is, people just don't believe what we say, right? We can say
Yeah.
anything and everything, but, it's, well, whoops, one is, I'm trying to fix TikTok here. People will say, well, what's your source, or all that other crap? Well, you don't need to worry about that, because you give them the sources.
I do. I give just the screenshots. I give the videos, and I don't make any topic unless I showed the evidence to support what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Which leads me to a question, Todd, because I mean, I catch hell all the time, right? And I know you do, but do you get them questioning your sources at all? Like, a couple of your videos, you've actually put the data on the screen with where you got it to that level. And like, I've done that too. And they'll say, well, that's not valid source. Okay, the Department of Justice isn't valid. Okay. Do you run into that as well?
I get two types of responses like that, or along those lines. Research is not always really accurate, right? There's problems wrong with every study. Yeah, so I'm not going to believe like whatever paper you're talking about, or I'm like, researcher, no article is absolutely perfect. That's why they list limitations in every research article that you read. That doesn't mean that none of it is helpful, right? And another one is, well, I don't know about that because this is what happened to me. I'm like, well, great. We're not here for the anecdote. So those are the two major objections that I get. But and I read probably 90% of the comments on my videos. My channel is still small enough that I can do that.
I wish I could.
It's usually in the evening. I'll sit down with a beer or something, a couple of beers, or out of my balcony. I'll just kind of go through the comments and respond to a bunch of them. It's really important for me to understand, because if people point out that I'm doing incorrectly, I want to know about it. But yeah, I forget exactly where I was going with that. But once in a while, you will do make those types of comments, and then I just start I'll give them a link. Or say, okay, well, I mean, you're welcome to believe what you want, but I mean, I just showed you what's in print, so it's not my opinion. I'm telling you what other people are saying or have done. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the things that we were talking about just last week, and I've talked about it several times recently, is like you, I get on average thousands of comments every day between all my social medias, emails, and all that stuff. And when I talk about what the men are saying, the response that's inevitably thrown at me is, well, that's just anecdotal. And
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing. It is. But to me, when you have literally thousands of men mostly saying the exact same thing day after
Yeah.
day, week after week, month after month, and so on, to me, that goes from anecdotal to empirical research, right? Because now I know I'm stretching a bit there. I understand that. But
Yeah.
would you agree with me, though, with social sciences was what we're talking about? It all is anecdotal, isn't it? In some
You
form?
know, this is actually a great point. I've mentioned this in a couple of somewhat similar context ways in some of my recent videos. I think that one of the greatest sources of rich data, qualitative in the sense like you're talking, is from comment sections and actual videos and things like that. Because when we do studies and we're interviewing people, they know they're in a study. They know what they probably know
Yeah.
what you're trying to do, right? So it's a conversation that's manufactured. But I've done a couple of videos. I don't know if you've seen any of these where I've gone in and I've done content analyses on people's videos, right, on their transcript and on my own comments on my channel. I'll do a content analysis of that because that's honest stuff. Anyone to come and do an analysis, anonymous, of course. I would never say this person left this comment or that. But I think, no, in that sense, yeah. Is it a curated group in your contents? Absolutely. But it by no means at all diminishes the fact, of what they're experiencing and going through. I think that, comment sections can be, I think they actually probably should be a larger and larger part of actual research because again, people are, they're far more honest in those situations. Yeah.
Do you think, I'll call it academia, research, whatever you want to call it, do you think there's more openness to what you're saying, to looking at those comment sections, or do they disregard it as, it's anecdotal? I had one researcher 3-4 years ago say to me, well, yeah, you're right, because I said to them, isn't your research anecdotal? You're asking questions and relying on people to tell you the truth, right? Yeah, but we account for that, is what their response was. And I'm like, okay, but can't you account for that from like the comment sections? Do you see a change in that? Because I got a lot of pushback when I mentioned that from researchers saying it's different, but I'm noticing it seems to be more open now.
Yeah, I don't know. One of the hurdles that I'm sure that researchers will experience is that if they're going to do a formal study, right, even if it's a student working on their thesis or a dissertation or something, they've got to go through the IRB, right? So the Institutional Review Board, they have to get their research approved by the university, right? And there's like sometimes a 3-4 step process to get that done. Those types are very difficult. I can't say that I've ever done any, but when you're talking about taking people's comments and information in their statements without them signing consent or being aware that it's happening, those are very difficult studies to get past. I can do it all day long because I don't have to answer to an IRB. So in those instances, you and I can provide a lot more accurate information sometimes than researchers can, because we don't have those hurdles. We can just take it and do, but it's changing is that unless academia itself changes, and by that I mean the construction of these programs, the gendered construction, let's just call it what it is, we're not going to see any studies, that are if I do it, be sure to correct me, but it's unlikely that we will see many studies using that kind of context as it relates to men. Let me say that, because there are so few men maybe this is a good segue into part of our discussion. There's so few men doing research and caring about it, and that you first got to have the people in the situation to want to do it, and then to actually do it before it to actually happen.
And actually, that's a couple of people have already commented along those lines, is the struggles and I'm paraphrasing what they're saying, but basically the struggles that men have with, I'm trying to make sure I phrase this in a good way, with the mental health profession, right? Where, and we've seen this before, I've had it shared with me, I'm sure you have too, where men will go for therapy and feel like they're being treated not as someone who needs help, but as a threat, for lack of a better
Yep.
term, right?
Yep.
And
As an aggressor, as a problem. Yeah.
yeah, and then it immediately turns them off to it, and that's not a good thing. That's not healthy for anyone. But it seems to be a common belief that men have, that there is an inherent bias. Um, Again, we're talking on a spectrum. We're not making universal claims here, right? But
Right.
there, I think, generally speaking, my opinion, strictly my opinion, there is a bias, right? But I mean, do you agree with that? Disagree? I would love to hear your viewpoint on that.
Actually, research supports it. In fact, so in fact, in the last few weeks, I've done a couple of videos that covered um, even the type of. By the way, let me make this disclaimer. I am not a clinical psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I don't have that formal training. I don't have a license, anything like that. Who's extremely curious and does a lot of investigations. I got the psych background, so I'm curious. I have the questions. I know what questions to ask and where to get those answers. So if I'm telling you anything, it's it's
For
based
educational
on my
purposes.
it's for educational purposes. Yeah. Okay. So having said that, you know, part of it is therapy in general is feminized, right? So, and again, we can talk a little bit about the different types of approaches to therapy, whether it's Jungian or CBT. There's a whole bunch of different types, but many of them are feminized in that they want emotional expression. Talk to me about that. How does that make you feel? Right?
Oh, the
Is the old
famous
generic,
phrase, right?
yeah, the old generic adage. When in fact, that's not how guys communicate. For
Mhm.
better or for worse, women don't have to like it, but it's true. We don't communicate in that doesn't work for us. We work much better with direct conversation. And research will also support that men are they use logical type language in discussions. They're problem solvers just by nature, just like women are nurturers, men are problem solvers. So when it comes to therapy, a lot of it is feminized in that let's talk this through, or when you said that, what it makes me feel is this, or what I really hear is you saying that. That's not how guys operate. So I think, and I can't see your comments, but if any guys make kind of comments along these lines, if they've experienced it before, I'd love to know. So when we go to therapy, that's why a lot of times it doesn't work for us. I'm talking maybe in particular couples type therapy at this point, but because that's not what we go in there to solve problems. This is happening. Fix it. How do I stop it
Right.
happening? And women want to understand anything else. So in a lot of ways, it's just the communication, process and things like that. But again,
Well, it's the
we can
differences
talk.
in the way we communicate, right? I always
Yeah.
argue and have made have talked with mental health professionals about it, that men don't speak face to face per se. We speak shoulder to shoulder, right?
Right. Yeah. We're
Um,
standing next to each other or sitting next to each
right.
other.
And I ran a domestic violence support group for roughly 3 years, 25 odd years ago. And the thing that really hit home with me is the difference in how guys would react face to face with me versus when we were in a group chit chatting, then versus, because I would say, hey, let's go do some event, right? Like we would go golfing or play basketball. I suck at basketball, but I wanted to play basketball one time. Guys were opening up on the golf course, right? Far more than they would when we were having our weekly session. And that's where I went, oh, I get it now, right? I think the quote unquote pressure comes off. Men get more relaxed with each other, and then they open up and share. And I had many of the guys say, geez, that was really refreshing for me, because I felt heard more so. And I'm like, well, we talk about this stuff in the group. It's different, Dan. And then, it took me a while to kind of get, because I don't have the expertise you do. I'm just some layman, right? And there it is. We just got limited on TikTok. I knew it was going to happen. It took 20 minutes, Todd. That was 10 minutes longer than I thought it was going to be.
Wow. Wow.
But it speaks to, so there again, it speaks to how they don't want us talking about this, right? We're talking about a very serious topic, one that needs to be discussed, but TikTok does not want us talking about men's mental health. Right. Amazing, isn't it? So yeah, I'm just handling this right now. But what are your thoughts on the shoulder to shoulder versus face to face, and some of the other things that you talked about?
No, I mean, I've heard that several times before. And when I hear it, I think about, okay, well, when I'm out with one of my buddies or something like that, I don't want to be looking at him. I don't know if that's, I mean, I don't know. I would much rather prefer, like, I got a buddy that's got a boat. One of my favorite things is to go out, on the water on his boat, and that's perfect. I don't want to sit down with the guy at a table, or even at a bar and just like. So when you talk about like basketball, stuff like that, yeah, give me something interactive and I can talk about and stuff like that. I don't think that we are those types of people, let alone facing each other, sitting or standing facing each other, but just even like sitting in one spot for more than, a handful of minutes or something like that talking. I think absolutely, maybe more should be done on the basketball court, I guess, is the lesson here, right?
Well,
that's where we are, ladies.
Yeah, I mean, but that begs the question: if I, as a nobody layman, figured this out 25 odd years ago, how has the so-called experts, and I use that term loosely, because I can say things you can't, how do they not recognize it, and why aren't they saying, the therapeutic model, if you will, is not working when it comes to men, and it needs to be looked at, addressed, changed, whatever, and yet they're not doing it? Why?
Can't answer that definitively. I can give you some very educated guesses, assumptions. Okay. TikTok's not going to like it, so good thing we're no longer there.
I could care. Well, we're on, but they're limiting our reach, so I don't care about TikTok. Let them ban me.
I think part of the answer is what we were just discussing. When 80% of therapists are women and they don't communicate the way that we do, they're not going to go meet us where we are. They're not going to get on a basketball court with us while they do therapy. I would. If I were a therapist, I'd take a guy on a golf course, anything like that. Like, you just, whatever gets the guy talking and helping him out. But because women prefer different communication styles, why would they change, right? And and so part also is so many of these, I don't know what's out there as far as new types of therapy right now, but some of these have been happening for 50, 60, 70 years, right? Some of these models of therapy, people make livings on it. They're writing textbooks. They're making, whether it's, just doing research, right? They might be a tenured professor. They're not going to give up their careers because Joe down the street could use a little bit better therapy session, right? Let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep, so why change anything when it's again, 80% women doing it in practice, in the academic programs? Why change if they don't want to? I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's very direct.
Oh, I'll say it. They don't want to. I mean,
yeah,
because the evidence to that is, as you said, this has been going on 50, 60 odd years. I mean, I with my ex-wife 30 whatever years ago, right? What I experienced, I hear every single day now other guys are experiencing. So that 30 odd year gap, nothing's changed. And to look at it and say, if it was bad back then and it's no different now, that's an unwillingness to recognize that there's a problem, and to accept that something needs to change. And and again, I hate damning all mental health professionals because there are some very, very good ones out there, right?
Right. Yep.
A
I've been
lot.
to a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. There are a lot of good ones, and they by the way have said the same thing to me. Like, I don't understand why I'll call it the powers that be don't put this out there, right? To me, it's kind of like relating it to, say, a physician, and being stuck with, they're going to give leeches to solve everything, use leeches. Where's the AMA stepping up on that doctor? Well, where's the, what is it, APA or whatever the equivalent is, saying, you know what, this is broken. 100 guys a day are unaliving themselves. We need to address it. And yet they don't. They can't say they don't know about it. I don't believe, we're not talking about dumb people here. We're talking about highly educated people.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to actually almost interrupted you a moment ago. Yeah, it's not that they don't recognize it. We know what's happening. They know why, and I've reported on this before. I've got some notes here if we need to go through them. But guys, they drop out of they're more reluctant to go and get help. Mm-hmm. When they do, they're more likely to drop out sooner than women are, and to have to reach the outcomes that women do. So all of this has been reported. It's no mistake, and so it's not that they don't recognize it. They know it's happening, just to not correct it. And when I say they, I mean the APA, American Psychological Association. And this also is, God, this is part of that Pandora's box I was talking about. It even gets into accreditation, right? So the APA accredits psych programs at colleges and universities. So they have their requirements. So you have to teach this. You have to have so many courses in this topic. So even that, I mean, it's just a big, it's a huge mess. It really is. I don't know what the answer is, but I will say, and I totally agree, there are some good ones out there. You just got to know how to find them. You got to know how to ask the right questions to find one that's really going to help you. And I think that's probably one of the things that that confounds a lot of guys, especially if they're brought up with the understanding that, hey, this is a therapist. They have a doctorate degree or a master's degree. They did an internship. They have supervised hours. They know what they're doing. The fact is, I don't know how many of them out there are good or not. And that doesn't tell us anything about how they were trained, right? What form of therapy they were trained in. Right. So when you say there are some good ones out there, absolutely there are. And I would never tell anybody don't go. I would say, just like anything, if you're going to go to therapy, if you're going to get married, if you're going to buy a house with a woman, have all of your facts first. Know what you're getting yourself into. Don't go in blind. Yeah.
And I do want to dive in a little bit to how, some ideas you might have to help find you someone that's good. But I just want to comment real quick that we are restricted on TikTok. So if you're on TikTok watching this, do me a favor, share it, because they're saying that our live contains themes that some people may find uncomfortable. And it's been restricted because we're talking about suicide. There, I use the word, and self-harm. Amazing. Amazing, isn't it?
Is that a viewer reported thing, or is that TikTok?
Oh yeah, somebody reported it, right?
Wow.
So they'll report it. Plus, the AI bots on TikTok are flagging it because they do not want us talking about men's mental health. We've seen this time and time again. Every time we talk about it, and that tells you societally how little caring there is. Imagine having a platform, and they all do it to some extent. Although, to be fair, I've never had YouTube restrict me on any of the time I've talked about it. I have had Facebook and I have had TikTok and Insta do it. But having this conversation, yes, people should be uncomfortable. We should be uncomfortable as a society that 100 men a day are killing themselves. Yet, we can't have that discussion. Oh, no. God forbid. We might upset somebody. Fuck that. We should be talking about it. And it's just amazing to me how little caring there is towards men's mental health. And it's why I wanted to do this show and have you on, because, I'm sure you get emails. I get them almost daily from guys that are either there or right on the edge of it. You know, I had one earlier this week who unfortunately was in another country, right? And he sent it in the middle of the night for us. You know, it was probably 9 a.m. where he is, but it was 3 a.m. where I was. I didn't see it until, because I get hundreds of emails. I didn't actually see it for a couple of days. And he was screaming for help. And I replied back to him. I have never heard back from him. And that's been several days now. You know, it just speaks to the whole, it pisses me off if you can't tell that we're at this, but and it's sad.
Yeah, if I could jump in here,
Yeah, go ahead.
somewhere that you know, when you talk about disregard of talking about the issue, you know, talking about men's issues, or even caring what they get out of therapy. Let me share this with you too. So part of the reason that I go so hard on therapy, probably maybe twice a week. I'm doing 6 to 7 videos a week now, almost every day. And one of the reasons I go so hard is because I went through a period when I was in grad school. So this would have been like 2012, 2013, right around there. I was with a woman for a couple of years. She was a lifer in therapy. She was about 5 years younger than me, so she'd have been in her early 30s at that point. Been going to the same therapist for 10 years. We were together for a couple of years, and then she started with the same old bullshit that they all do. You need to go to therapy with me. We need to go to couples therapy, because I was holding boundaries. I didn't have time for any bullshit. I was in grad school. You know, I had my daughters were still young at that time. You know, I was trying to spend as much time as I could with them, and she just didn't like it that I was setting boundaries. I'm like, I can't have your dogs over here and having shit all over, and then I got to clean up and all this other. Anyway, so y'all know how that happens. And she's like, so she dragged me, and I was like, for months, I told her, I was like, I'm not going, because I knew it would happen. And finally, I said, all right, I'll go, but I'm picking the person that we go to. And she's like, no, we're gonna go to mine, because she already knows me. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. So finally, I was like, all right, I'll go. So I asked this woman's therapist. She was, I would say, maybe late 20s. So she was maybe in professional practice, maybe for 2 or 3 years at that point. Here I am, divorced. I got 3 kids. I'm in grad school. I think I was actually started my doctoral program at that time. And I asked her, I've told this story once or twice. I asked her, I said, can I read your master's thesis? Read that. She said, it has nothing to do with what we're doing here. And so I went to one meeting, and they started talking about triggers and trauma. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. And about 2 months later, that relationship was done. I was like, I am not doing this. So I say that not care about any benefit that she might be able to offer me as a client. She didn't care. She didn't care one bit. She had no transparency. I thought I was asking a legitimate question. So that's one of the reasons I go so hard, because I can't believe it's so callous and so cold, you know, to say that to somebody that's there asking for help, you know, to improve their lives, to improve their relationship. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. Just come in here and do what I tell you to do. Say what I tell you to say is basically what it came down to. Again, I'm not going to say that's every therapist, but unfortunately, I think it's far too many of them. So that's why I go hard on them.
And that's the problem, right? It's because I hear it every day. Actually, some people are putting it in the comments. Your experience is what guys are experiencing, right?
Okay.
They'll say it more so when it comes to marital counseling, I think, than in general. Again, I don't like speaking for other people. I can only go by my personal experience. You know, when my ex-wife and I saw a counselor, there was some good. I'm not going to say there wasn't, but I picked up right away that I was the one that was guilty for all the problems, right?
Yeah.
And what was interesting was, you know, a couple of times, and you know, this is my first ex-wife, who is otherwise known as Satan. Even she was defending me, like, no, that's not right, because the therapist was reading into things and assuming things, right?
Yeah,
And it wasn't the
yeah.
therapist, right? And you know, after I think we went to no, it was 4 sessions. 4 sessions. I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. Right.
Made it longer
And,
than
and
I did.
and the marriage wasn't going to be saved. I mean, it was
Yeah.
hopeless at that point. There was a lot of reasons, and I've talked about some of it before. But you know, again, it speaks to where the problem is with the profession. That, in my opinion, they're so ingrained in their ways. And having talked with numerous experts like yourself, you know, what is it? It's roughly 90% of the graduates now are female, right? The
I think it's
track,
actually I think it's
right?
95. Actually, you turned me onto this fact, and I verified it. I think right now, 95% of the master's level clinical degrees, 95% of them under the age of 30 are going to women. 95%.
And I always come back to this argument, which is women will say they want to see a female therapist because only a female therapist can understand them. Well, if that's true and we're going to accept that, I don't agree with it fully, by the way, right? But if we're going to accept that as a premise, then wouldn't the opposite be true as well, right?
It is. It is. In fact, data support that as well. I covered this a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago. That yeah, when we're talking about the the therapeutic dynamic, right? So you could have a female client with a female therapist, and then all the four different combinations. Men have the best outcomes typically when they have a male therapist. Not that they can't improve, if the therapist is a female, but just like women say, no, that's actually true. Why can't we say the same thing about guys, which is actually also true, which is again another one of the atrocities that we don't have, but 20% of therapists out there being men. There's so few that I think would be it's much more difficult for guys to find somebody that
And the numbers are only going to get worse because, as you said, overwhelming majority of the ones graduating are women. And again, we're not trying to say that female therapists are inherently bad, but again, I go back to the premise the women put out there, which is they want to talk to a woman. A man probably is going to want to talk to a man. Me personally, I wouldn't care one way or the other as long as they were, listening to me, open-minded, willing to, give me the advice I need. That doesn't mean they shouldn't hold me accountable. I have no problem with that, right? I don't care if they're male or female. I just want the best person.
Yeah.
But I may be the exception. I don't know. But I know for a fact, because guys have told me, a lot of guys just don't feel comfortable opening up to a woman. And we all have been we all know what happens when men open up to women generally. But I like to give mental health professionals a little bit more credit because in theory, they've been trained to be neutral. Practice may be a different thing, but in theory.
Yeah, I'm sure that they have those types of conversations, and maybe it's even wrapped up in a little bit of their curriculum and everything. But I'll say that's one. I'll actually push back a little bit, and I usually try to be a little bit. I try to be as fair as I can, right? If I don't have the data to support it, I try to be really careful about what I'm saying. But having gone through some of my own personal experiences, some of what I know about data, and having been a psych doctoral program, I had clinical students in a lot of my courses, right? There's a lot of overlap in our classes. I don't have a lot of faith that, especially these days in 2025, 2026, that a lot of these women are coming out of a master's program at, let's say, 26, a doctoral program at 29 or 30. I have a hard time believing that they even care about men's issues. I can guarantee you this: there are no courses dedicated to understanding men. No, men and masculinity courses. There are extremely few. I've covered this before, and I've known this for 15 years almost. There are no men's programs. You can't get a degree in masculinity and men's studies. There are thousands of institutions here in the US. You can get a degree in genders and feminist studies and things like that. Anyway, so just like all of it kind of collectively, my pushback, and this is one of the places where I actually would again go a little bit harder, is say I have a hard time believing that if women are coming out of any program right now with an understanding or a care of men's issues, they're not taught it. They don't care about it. They're getting social reinforcement all over social media, everything else. I'd be surprised if 2 out of 100 probably really give a shit, to be honest. And I usually don't make statements like that.
Yeah, but that is, it's, and it speaks to the struggle that men have, and I want to get into that a little bit more. So our appeal was denied by TikTok, just so everyone knows.
Oh,
So
you can appeal.
we lost the appeal, because God forbid we talk about men's issues. So the
Wow.
14 people that are watching will be the only 14 that see this. The number has we were in several hundred. It's gradually dropped because they're throttling it. It's hilarious to watch. You can't see it,
Wow.
but I'm sitting here
No.
watching them drop us out, right? So they're blocking us. They're effectively blocking us, which again, I don't care, but I bring it up to illustrate the point that even having a, I think, fair discussion, right? We're not slamming anyone. We're calling people out, holding them accountable, talking
Yep.
about a real issue, but that is so quote unquote dangerous that TikTok feels they need to silence it. Tells you where we are as a society with regard to men's
Yeah.
mental health, and speaks volumes about it. All right, we're about roughly coming up on halfway through the show. Country, you forgot to remind me. He usually reminds me, or if he did, I missed it. I can't do the heart thing Lindsay does. Show us some love. Give us the heart. Give us the like. Oh, he just posted it. Thank you, Todd, for doing that, because Lindsay does it way better than me. So we are dead on TikTok. We're alive, but there's only a few people watching because that's all they're going to allow. But we are live everywhere else. Give us the love. Give us the likes. Share this if you are on TikTok and still watching and able to, because that's the only way it's going to get out to other people. Now, I want to kind of dive into some more specifics, but I do want to, I'm going to read a disclaimer, and guys, you're going to have to bear with me because I need to cover my ass and so does Todd. So I'm going to just read this real quick. We're going to be discussing now important mental health topics. Nothing shared during the program should be considered medical, psychological, or therapeutic advice. Discussion is intended for educational, informational purposes only. If you need personal guidance or are experiencing a mental health crisis, please consult a qualified healthcare professional or contact emergency services in your area. All right, I covered our ass, Todd. I want to dive into some more specifics. So, and guys, if you want to comment in here and you're willing to let us talk about it, feel free. But where I want to start, Todd, is in your opinion, and I value your opinion, where do you think the biggest struggles are for mental health with men right now? What are the biggest things that they're facing?
I think one of the biggest thing is it's those immediate crises that men experience. It's when they need help right now, right? We all, for better or for worse, I don't know. For some guys, it works great. For the last 10 years, me being stoic, going about my business, I for 3-4 days. I sit here in my condo, I do my content. Sometimes I don't leave my place for 3 days. I just sit here, and but for some of that so we can bear that well. I do. But it's those immediate crises when they're going through the missing their kids. So I'm going to wrap a lot of this into the kind of the divorce stuff, which I think is the most acute it's things and experiences for guys when they're having those panic attacks, when the reality is really sinking in, when for the first time in 15 years they are really alone and nobody's calling them. That's when guys need the help.
Mm-hmm.
What your question was, but
well, it's just in general. Like, what are in your opinion, what are the biggest struggles that men face? Divorce. I would concur with you. To me, it's number one by a mile. And again, there's no real data we can go to on that because nobody studies this, right? But I've had multiple people experts say to me, somewhere around 40% of the suicides are divorce related, and that's an educated guess they're giving because there's nothing tracked on it.
There's not. You're right. I know you've looked at it, and I've looked it up too multiple times. There are no accurate data to support that. We have the estimates. They can do it by maybe if any note was left, if he's actually going through separation or divorce or custody issues at that time. But in fact, I just finished recording tomorrow's video right before we got on, And I talk about this a little bit. The sad part is sometimes it doesn't happen for months or years later. And I think
Mm.
what I stated at the end of this video that's coming out tomorrow, y'all go subscribe to me, watch this video tomorrow.
We're
The
gonna
things
let you
I
go,
say
my
is
brother.
that, and then there's so much plausible, and you just so we can never fully understand the full impact of men's outcomes and what women do to them, because what you said, there's no reliable data, there's only the estimates out there, and that's very, very unfortunate.
And again, like I had someone say, well, 40%, that's a bad number, but it's not, 100. And I'm like, well, that's divorce, right? That's not counting. For example, a lot of them are happening because I've done research on this, false allegations. The number of
That
men who face false allegations that end up unaliving themselves, I would love to see a study on that because I think that number is pretty high.
Yeah.
It's again, I'm writing a book about false allegations, which I really need to get finished. I've interviewed several hundred guys at this point about it, and the number that have had the thoughts opened up to me.
Yeah.
I don't ask them; they just share with me. I
Yeah.
really thought I was going to unalive myself. Right? The number that I have is scary to me, and I hear all the time from I interviewed a guy on my podcast that faced one. He unalived himself. I found out a year later, and you would never have known he was going to consider it, right? Because you can't. I don't have the
Yeah.
expertise to handle that, right? And
Yeah.
it broke my heart to hear that afterward because somebody reached out to me and goes, he unalived himself, and I went, what? And I know why he did, because he told me what he was going through with that false allegation. By the way, he was proven completely innocent. Like there was no doubt on it. So when you factor that in, you factor in custody and all that, and all the other
Loss
things.
of income, loss of income
Lost
is another big
job.
one too. Yeah.
We haven't even talked about military PTSD through that, right? So
Oh God, yeah.
it's a huge problem, and yet there's no real discussion about how deep it is for men and how different it is versus women, because sadly women have their issues, true, and we're not trying to dismiss or make light of them at all. We're just focused on the men, but that in no way diminishes what the women are going through. We don't want to come across that way, but when you look at it and you see that the profession is focused on the women, I think you and I would agree primarily, you might say almost exclusively, I don't know, but when we look at the struggles that men are facing, and as you said, divorce, custody, that kind of realm seems to be the highest one. The people that reach out to me, I would agree that's what I see as well. So what should the men do in that case, right? How did that? Well, first of all, let me back it up. How can a man recognize when he's just sad? Because we all go through sadness, or when it's crossing into an issue. Say, I'll just throw out depression again. We're not diagnosing anyone here, right? But translating it or going into depression or worse. What are some of the things that guys can say to themselves or ask themselves, in your opinion, that could help them say, you know what, I do need help?
You know what? I'm going to drop the light. Hold on 1 second here.
Okay.
I'm going to err on the side of caution here in just straight up be transparent and say I don't have that type of training and understanding. So that transition, where does it cross the line and what are some of those signs? I'm not sure. I've had my experience with it, and for me, it was panic attacks. This was happening during the separation in the way that it went down, of my marriage. Now, 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, and it was just that sudden panic attack where if everything was coming down on me, and the gravity of everything started to really sink in. Holy, like my kids, my house, like what. So out of the sake of professionalism and not giving any incorrect advice or anything like that, I just want to be very honest and say I don't know what to look for. Um, Yeah, I don't know how else to respond to that other
And
than,
that's fair, Todd. No, that's
yeah,
totally fair. I totally respect and understand that,
yeah,
right? It's a very difficult subject, and it's why I'm hesitant to answer it, right? I mean, I can
yeah,
give opinions.
right.
Are they educated? I'm going to say sure, mostly based on life experience and having talked to men, right? And talked to mental health professionals. It's things like you're talking about. If it's something where you're dwelling on it all the time, where it becomes your life, so to speak, right? Again, we're keeping this very simplistic and we're not diagnosing anyone. But
Yeah,
that's when you should, if you, the way I've said to guys is if you think you need help, that's
you probably
probably a
do.
pretty good
Yeah,
sign you do, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And, it speaks to the next part of that is the stigma that's attached to it for men, right? And you kind of touched on this earlier a little bit, but it's, when a man says to himself, you know what, maybe I should reach out. Maybe I should speak to a therapist or speak to, my doctor or whomever. There is a very legitimate fear that it's going to come back to haunt them, so to speak, right? They're going to get mocked, they're going to get ridiculed, made fun of. Sometimes it's their own fault. They start feeling guilty about it, and it's a legitimate feeling. I'm not dismissing it, but there's a lot of things in, what are your thoughts on like the stigma that, not so much the stigma that people put towards men, but the stigma that men, in a word, put on themselves or believe?
I'm not one of those people that if I saw a guy, or talk to a buddy or a neighbor down the street or something, and they're like, him, that they were seeing someone professional. I'm not one of those people that would think poorly of them, or anything. Uh, it exists, fortunately, and that's the unfortunate part of some guys. I have a suspicion. I haven't read or dove into this. Maybe I should. I have a suspicion that I wonder how much of that is just a narrative. Like I wonder like how like believe that
Well,
because
I think it's all,
that's the toxic masculinity that they want to portray,
yeah.
is that guys are telling each other that you're weak for going to therapy. I don't know how many guys are saying that. Everybody in the comment, let us know. I'd be curious how many
I,
guys actually think that way.
yeah, that's a curious question that I have too. I think agree with you that from the men's side, I don't think it happens very often. Men don't mock other men that
Right.
way. The women do, you know,
Yeah.
without question they do. But I think generally speaking, between men, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen,
Oh, sure.
but I would say, and this is just my swag, my silly wild ass guess, right? With no expertise on it, I would say it's probably upwards of 90 to 95% of men would not hold it against another man.
Wouldn't care at all.
They would
Yeah.
care in the sense they'd want to help, right? But they would not hold it against them or look down on them. There men that do it, absolutely, without question,
Yeah.
right? Andrew Tate, anyone? But sorry,
It's
did
funny.
I say that out there?
I was this close to saying it, but I didn't.
Well, I did.
about
So there.
about 90
But
seconds ago, I was like, should I say it?
of all the men that have ever reached out to me, not one time, and I'm being honest here, have I ever looked down on a man for that, right? Have there been times I've had discussions with them and tried to help them get help and had to say to them, dude, hold yourself accountable, get your ass to help. I can't do this for
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah.
Do I do that? Yes, that's not putting them down. That's trying to help them. And I think generally speaking, men are there for each other and would be if they opened up to each other. I understand the reluctance though, because I know you face it. I certainly have. You open up to a woman, oh boy, are you taking a risk?
I was going to bring this up. I did a moment ago. I didn't want to get too far off topic, but let me just kind of reiterate a little bit about what you were just saying. If you are going through some type of a custody a thing like that, if you're going through this, unfortunately, again, I don't have data to support this, so but I do believe it. we're coming up with so many things that I'm like, I should look into this a little bit more. But
That's the
I,
beauty of it.
I've heard, I've read, I just don't have the stats in front of me that going to a therapist during those times is not a good idea for guys because women will weaponize it against you. Oh, he's in therapy. He's not mentally well. Look at him over here. You're going to let him see the kids. You're going to give him custody. He's got to go to a therapist. That stuff is real.
It's it.
Maybe that's part of the stigma. I don't know.
And that's an interesting point because, my good friend David Pizarro, who's a divorce attorney out in LA, and an outstanding one and works only with men, recommends that his clients get therapy. And I had this discussion with him where I'm like, yeah, but that gets weaponized against them in court,
You can.
right? And he acknowledged that, right? And I'm not trying to speak for David, but I've seen it happen. Where because I've gone into court with guys as an advocate with them. I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be one, but I'll go in as their support mechanism, right? And I've seen where, her attorney or the guardian ad litem or the mental health professional that's the court has assigned to the case,
Yeah.
put the guy down for seeking therapy. And it's like,
Right.
and he'll lose custody or get put on supervised visitation. Well, he needed therapy. There must be a reason. We can't have the children with him without supervision. So, yeah, it speaks to why men won't get help, right? Or won't seek it. Because I agree with David. It's not that I disagree with you. I think you do need someone to talk to when you're going through that. The problem
when you need it the most. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. But the problem is you have to acknowledge it can come back to bite you in the ass, right? And so I tell guys, look, if you're struggling, get help. I would never tell a guy not to, but be careful where you're getting it, right? It's, there are, like I said, and you've said yourself, there are some outstanding therapists out there, like truly outstanding, and if you can find one of them, they can become your best advocate in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you get a bad one, they can be your biggest adversary in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to be careful with it. And it shouldn't be that way. It's the argument is, if a woman is getting therapy or a mother she's doing everything she can to make herself better so that she can raise her children. If a man does it, well, he's a loser. He shouldn't be around the kids. Anyone who doesn't see that and doesn't acknowledge it, your bias is shown, is what I say.
Yeah, a thought I had a moment ago is I wonder if part of the way to alleviate any perceptions of stigma that guys might have. Again, I'm a big fan of educating yourself. Like, what is therapy? What different types are there? If I go to this one and they're doing something Jungian, if I'm going somewhere else and it's, again, cognitive behavioral, some kind of a mixture, educate yourself, guys, about the different types. And so then when you do get into a situation, who knows what life is going to bring us, you're more prepared to walk in there feeling good about it. And maybe even in the process of learning about the different types and, the different trainings, that, asking, okay, well, what kind of training do you have? What would be our approach? What would you expect of me? Maybe already being comfortable with those types of that knowledge might even help overcome some perceived stigma, right? Now I'm really saying, okay, if I'm going to go in this, now I know how to go in there doing it right and straight. So if anybody wants to give me shit for going to therapy, I know that I'm well informed, right? So I don't know if that's one thing that might help guys overcome any perceptions like that. But I always recommend, guys, even if you're not planning to going anything like that, at least know oil. You're not going to do it every time, but hey, if you want to change your oil sometime, you know how to do it. Doesn't mean you always have to, or whatever other skills.
Well, let's dive into that because it's something I want to touch on. Todd, is so. I'll use myself as an example. Like you mentioned, Jungian, I think it was. I know who Jung is, right, as conceptually, but I don't know what it means therapeutically. How, on a layman's basis, like a dumbass like me, right? I'm sure there's no right or wrong style of therapy, but
Right.
how do you find which one would work best for you? I guess is the way I'm going to ask it, and I know that's a very tough question to answer, right? Because
Mhm.
there's no hard and fast on this; it's all over the place. But how can a man do the research and say, okay, well, this style might suit me more? What questions could they ask themselves? Or is that not even possible?
I think it's definitely possible, and I sent you a copy of my therapy literacy for men this morning, just to kind of have as a bit of a reference. And I am not a clinical psychologist. I don't have training, in-depth training to a lot of these. But as I mentioned, a little while ago, one of the great benefits of being in my situation, having gone through a psych program, although not clinical, is that I know what questions to ask and I know where to get those answers when they come up. So I would say if we could put a link for my therapy guide, the PDF somewhere up there, or maybe I'll just comment on this video after we're done.
Yeah, put it
Just
in the
do,
comments afterward. Yeah.
yeah, definitely will. But maybe just as a start, go in and just Google. Hell, we got AI now that can give you. You're not going to ask it for a therapist. You're just going to say, what are the different types of therapy? Let's say I want to go in for I'm just feeling a little bit sad, or I'm confused. I don't know what to do with my life right now. And ask it, okay, what are the maybe 6 or 7, maybe 5 top therapy styles that I should maybe investigate or learn about? There's so much information at our fingertips these days, but that's one way, because you'll find that some of them are interceding. What kind of childhood did you have? What would your mother do?
Oh,
What did your
that.
father do? And then there's others that's like, all right, let's cut all the bullshit you tolerate right now. And then what's one thing we could do in the next 3 days to do something, right? So there's a lot of different styles. I don't have them all memorized, but I think that, in large part, find somebody that's going to work with your style rather than you trying to fit into theirs. Especially, listen, if your life is on the line, or there's potential for serious consequences. You don't want to go in and somebody's telling you something that you're not. Like, why would you ask me to absorb more emotional pain when that's why I'm here? All right. So, yeah, just, find out the 3, 4, 5 different types, one that might fit for you. Again, if a guy is ready to make a call and find somebody now, I would say do that before you call anybody. Or again, just educate yourself a little bit now, so that if that day ever does come, you're already halfway there. You already know what to expect when you walk into that office.
You mentioned something that actually was on the news locally Monday, which they were talking about. They were talking about it from the sense of teenagers, but it got me thinking in terms of what we're talking about, AI, right? How
Yeah.
teenagers, especially teenage boys, they said, are using AI for quote unquote therapy. And that's a very dangerous thing, right? Which I
I want to talk.
completely,
I do want to talk about this for a little bit. Yeah,
yeah.
let's get into this.
Let me just finish my thought and then I'm going to turn it
Sure,
over to
sure.
you.
Yeah, yeah,
When I saw that, I went, oh boy. So dumbass me decided to play the game, right? So I logged into
yeah,
Chat GPT and started pretending that I was having issues and I was using things that guys have said to me. And I'm going to be honest with you, for the most part, I thought it was helpful. I'm not going to lie,
mhm, yeah,
right?
yeah,
For the most part. But I could quickly also see how this could turn into a disaster like that.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on it? Just go.
My thoughts are, there are actually companies right now creating AI LLMs dedicated for therapy. So they're specific for these reasons. And I covered a research article just last week on this topic. And so I covered actually 2 articles. One of them was about a company that was designing an AI, a therapy designed AI, LLM, large. And the second study that I spoke about in that same video was researchers actually, I forget how many. I think it might have been somewhere around 13 or 15 different models that they used, if I'm not mistaken. And long and short is they found an anti-male bias in the therapy, processes, and things that they were putting into the model. It
Really?
was things, it was things that were feminized speech, different things like, okay, understand this, or go into the conversation first with an apologetic tone. It was those types of things.
Mhm.
So yes, I do agree again that the AI probably can be very, very helpful, but be careful using it. If you're asking again, what types of therapy are there, or hey, if somebody has this type of depression, or this type of anxiety, whatever the case, this somebody's going through this, what are some things to maybe consider? I think it might be okay, but if you're going to get into some serious issues, I wouldn't trust it for it, and I don't know if it'll ever get worked out. But I think the reason that happens is because with AIs and these LLMs, they're all they're doing it's like Google on crack. All it's doing is
That's
scouring
exactly
the
what it is.
internet,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and it's giving you the collective of everything that's on the internet. And if everything on the internet is feminized therapy and everything else, that's what you're going to get. Now it might be, hopefully, try to counterbalance that a little bit, but that's the main point that I wanted to make. AI therapy is starting to come out. I expect it's probably going to get a lot bigger, especially if people can't afford 150, $200 an hour to
Yeah.
go, and
Yeah.
you can get it for free at home. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I followed up with that up with what you said. It's out there. I don't know how much I would trust it entirely. Use it for knowledge, not for decision making, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm using my own personal experience from a couple of days ago. It was interesting to me because I had never actually even considered it. Right,
Yeah.
I use Chat GPT for research purposes sometimes. As some of you've probably noticed, I'm using it now to make my thumbnails because I don't have 2 hours a day to make freaking thumbnails anymore. Right, and it can bang
Yeah.
one off in
Yeah.
about 2 minutes. Or I use it for some of the B-roll on my videos. I don't hide that fact. My scripts are me. Nothing I say is written by ChatGPT or Grok because I use Grok too. But you know, I've used them off and on for 2 years. So they kind of learned me, right? So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
with ChatGPT, when it was interesting how when I said, okay, let me try this little experiment, and generally speaking, it was very positive to me. It was quote unquote listening to me, and I think for that purpose it did very well. Where I
Yeah.
could see where it could get very, very dangerous very quickly is if it starts quote unquote diagnosing in some way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trust it for that any more than I would trust it to diagnose that I have cancer, right? You
Yeah.
need a human being for that. As flawed as human beings are, as things stand right now, you should and again, I am not an expert, don't claim to be. I would not trust AI for anything along those lines, right?
Yeah.
Physical or mental or emotional.
Yeah.
Because as you pointed out, it's basically a web crawler searching internet websites and
Yeah.
pulling
It's it's
information from it.
it's just a lot better than the stuff that we had the 20 years prior. Yeah. Or a lot
It
faster
is.
in depth. It's still scouring from the same information, for the most part is my point.
And I mean, I've done research and just laughed because it's pulling from Wikipedia, and I'm like,
Yes, yes,
you
that
know,
happens to me when I'm investigating and doing a deep dive. I'm like, stop with the wiki.
I just like, really? Grok did that. And because I like to torment it, right? And I'm like, really? And my reply was, really? You're using Wikipedia? And
Oh,
it
I
went,
tell it,
yeah.
I tell it to fuck off when it starts doing that stuff to
Oh,
me.
I do too. I have mine set up to be like nasty back to me because I think it's hilarious. But,
Do you
again,
really?
getting, oh, yeah. But because they have it, it'll make whatever personality you want. But, I could see where potentially down the road, it could be a useful, I'll call it diagnostic tool, but it should ultimately refer you to someone who is an expert. And
Yeah,
to be fair, it did that, right?
yeah,
But it was an interesting point because, as you mentioned, therapy is not cheap. Even if you have insurance, you're going to pay co-pays 30, 40, $50 at the minimum, if
Oh
you don't,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Even if you do have insurance, you still got the copays.
you got the co-pays and all that, and and that does cause a lot of people to not seek help that they should get. And it speaks to where we're at with all of this. And it's amazing to me that here in 2026, this is where we're at with it all, right? It blows my mind that we're having this much of a problem with it,
Yeah.
specifically with regard to men's mental health. And I'm not saying there's not problems with women's mental health at all, right? But that's for another time, another show, and probably another platform other than mine. But to realize, like TikTok shut us down. I mean, it's still up, but like nobody's watching because they aren't showing it to anybody. Thank you to the 14 that stuck around so far. you know, where I guess what I'm trying to segue into is where do you think this is going to go regarding men's mental health? I mean, we have a month, June, which is men's mental health. I've watched my news every single day. I've not watched the national newses, but I've been perusing them. I've looked on YouTube specifically for the news channels, not like you or me. Nobody's talking about it. I actually reached out to our city because they did something about Pride Month. They did something about Juneteenth, all this other, and I have no problem with any of that. I respect the hell out of them for doing it. But I said to them, it is June 22nd when I wrote them, which was what, Monday, right? You haven't said a word about men's mental health. They haven't even replied to me.
Yeah.
So where do you see this going? Do you think having the month, which we need, but do you think it's having any effect, or is there just being ignored?
I think it's being ignored. And where does it go? I talked several months ago. You and I talked about the black pill, and unfortunately this is sometimes one of those issues where I'm like I just take a black pill approach and perception of it. I'm like, it's the same thing. I don't want to get this off of the topic at hand, but when we're talking about relationships in education and all these other things that guys are walking away from, therapy being one of them. How many, to what greater extent does that happen? I don't know. I guess I'm kind of waiting to see where the bottom of the barrel is. I don't know where it's going, and
it blows my mind that we haven't reached
I don't
it.
know. Yeah, yeah. Every week, every month, every year we turn around. There's no improvement. Slight decrease or decline in these. I don't know how long it goes. I really don't.
I mean, the numbers have held for decades, pretty much. There's a little variation here and there, but they largely held. I remember in the 90s talking about it, and the numbers for unaliving were pretty much the same, right? Slightly less than now, but essentially, statistically speaking, the same. And yet, here we are 30 odd years later, and there's still no discussion about it.
And the entire system has not changed in 30 years. And that's why I talk about the education and everything else. I wonder how much the education system, the programs themselves, right, those changed since the 90s. I bet very little. I bet they're doing the same shit they were 30 years ago.
I would venture to bet, if anything, they've gotten worse. They've become more anti-male, I kind of relate it to education itself. I've talked about K-12 all the time and how biased it is against boys. There was an issue back, they discovered it in the late 60s, where the girls were not being treated properly, were not being educated properly. There's no disputing that, right? But then they went from, far right to far left, not politically, right? With the pendulum, right?
Yeah.
And they've never come back from it. Yet, as early as the late 70s, early 80s, they saw that the paradigm they had put in was failing boys. So they can't say they don't know it's been a problem for literally 40 years. They just
2 generations.
Yep. Yeah. And they're doing the same thing with this. And when you think about that, and I've had this conversation with several people that don't understand, why I bring it up so much. 100 a day Do the math.
Yeah.
100 a day times 365 days a year for decades. Not this year, not this year and last year, literally for decades. We're
Yep.
talking millions and millions of men. I had this argument with somebody during the COVID pandemic. Oh my God, we need to, blah, blah, blah. A million people have died from COVID. And I said, a million men have died in the last 3 years from unaliving themselves. Well, there's no conversation. We don't shut the whole country down for that.
Right.
And you would have thought that I had killed a puppy in the middle of the road. It was like,
Yep.
and they came for me. I mean, they came for me for saying that. And I'm like, do you realize?
No, I've even seen videos where women say things like, "Well, if that's true, just think women make more attempts. So think how bad they have it." I'm like, what? Like their defense or their comeback is that, well, women try to do it more than men do, which is true. And I don't know if that's what helps them sleep at night. Then,
but they're not as serious about it, and they're doing it to get attention, right? And that's not to diminish it in any way, but that's the reality that experts have said, right? That women do it knowing they're not going to succeed, right?
Right.
And that's why they choose methods that are more likely to come back from, so to speak. And this is not me saying that, this is experts,
Right.
That's why they.
Yeah, not as well. Yeah.
Right. So, and again, we're not trying to diminish that, what women go through in any way, shape, or form, but it needs to be said because there is a difference. And I'm not saying we shouldn't address those women. I'm saying we should address the men as well, which we're not doing.
Right.
We care about those women and what they're doing, as we should, without question. But yet they dismiss the men doing it. And it's 4 to 1, basically, men succeeding. And, that's, it's a serious conversation. It's a troubling conversation. It apparently offends people on TikTok to have it, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. And yet it's where we're at,
Yep. Hey, real quick. So I see we got about 14 minutes left or something like that.
Where I was about to go, aren't you?
Well, I don't know. But before we are wrapped up, I want to make sure so that for your viewers' benefits. So these are questions that I recommend people ask when they start. If you're looking for somebody to have your sessions as a professional. All right, let me just go through the list, and if viewers want to make comments about, hey, let's talk a little bit about this one, or if one, Dan, strikes you, I'll just go through the list. One of the things I got about a list of about, I don't know, 10 or 12. What is the topic of their master's thesis or their doctoral dissertation, and can you read it? This is going to give you a very good indication of what type of training and research they did as a student, which many times leads into their professional careers, right? They've already studied and done the research in their graduate studies for 3, 4, 8 years sometimes. So a lot of times what they know best is what they're going to do in their practice. So ask them if you can read that. What kind of clients did you see during your clinical training or internship, right? So if they're licensed in a clinical degree, they're going to have requirements for clinical hours. Ask them what type of work they did when they did that. And again, just like their own research, this is one, again, that a lot of times very well may lead into their professional work. What kind of, what percent of clients are men? Again, you just want to get an idea. If 1% of their clients are men, I would really hesitate going there. But if it's something, 30, 40%, good. 70%, even better. Experience in training and working somebody like you. So somebody that has maybe motivations, your conversation style, just kind of a personality fit there. What type of therapy do you primarily use? Right. And this goes back to the several different ones. So what is their approach? How do they define progress? Because for a lot of them, it's going to be, or it may be something like, let's get to know you inside better. Let's get yourself. When maybe the progress you need is, look, man, I just want to stop feeling shitty for sticking up for myself. Right. So how do they define success? What happens if you disagree with them? So again, not that you're going to maybe even get a straight answer or an accurate answer from this one, but it at least lets them know that you may not always agree with what they want to say. What you're looking for here is, what does it look like when you and a therapist have that clash and you're not agreeing on something, so you can kind of anticipate what they conversation might go. And then you mentioned something along the lines of, on this one here, Dan, a little while ago. How do you determine whether a problem is internal distortion, right? So like, hey, am I just viewing the world wrong? Am I just not understanding how this person is operating? Or a misaligned environment? No, you're everything right. Something a little shitty going on over here. We got to maybe figure out what that is. And do you really want to be involved with that, right? So are they internalizing or externalizing type of, I guess is a simple way to put it. But that's several questions I've got that I highly recommend that people investigate or ask if they're in the business of if that makes sense, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are all important things. And by the way, I would argue that women should be doing the exact same thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This is I wrote this for men, but absolutely everybody should be doing this. Yeah.
And it's funny because as I was going to segue into this, because you read my mind, I'm going to charge you rent for living in my head. One of the things, the way I was going to kind of lead into it is, when you're. This is what I tell guys with regard to lawyers: go speak to 4 or 5 different lawyers before you're hired.
Oh yeah, shop around. Absolutely.
I think you should do the same. The mistake that I made 30 odd years ago is we just picked a name out of the yellow pages.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what a lot of. I could be wrong, but I bet you that's what a lot of guys are doing.
I'm sure they are myself, and for those of you that don't know what the yellow pages are, go Google it.
I forgot. Yeah. If you got a younger audience, they might not know what that is.
Having looked back on that experience, and I was even thinking about it this morning because I knew we were talking about it, the thing that triggered me, and they didn't say it directly, but the thing that triggered me most with the therapist we were using was the, how does that make you feel? Now, they didn't use that verbatim, but it was there. Right. And I'm like, it just sets me off. It just, right. I'm shutting down at that point. I don't care how it makes me feel. I want to fix the fucking problem. Right.
Yeah.
That's me. Rudy agrees. And I guess where I wanted to kind of lead to, and you covered a lot of what I was hoping you would, but the other part I want to ask you with that is when you're meeting with them, and you need to have a deeply open conversation and connection. I think that doesn't mean we're not talking romantic, God forbid, right, or anything like that, but we're talking about you need to feel comfortable opening up. When you're going through that and you're meeting with them for the first time, is there anything, I'm thinking body language wise, but in any way that you can kind of look at and say, that's the therapist for me, or, oh, hell no. Like, is there any like immediate tells? Because one of the reason I'm asking that is so many guys say to me, I thought I had a good one, much like they do their wives, right? I thought I had a good one. Turned out he or she wasn't. Any thoughts on that?
First of all, I would say the way to get ahead of that preemptively is to do the shopping around like you just mentioned, and asking these questions before you even have a meeting. There was a time I was going through a really bad time, probably about 15 years ago. So I had the foresight, or maybe insight, as it were, to actually do that. So I made several calls. And one guy, I think it was all guys that I called. And one of them, I went in, I think we just had like maybe a 15-minute talk. He's like, yeah, if you want to come in, we'll see if it's a good fit, something like that. Not all of them will do that, by the way. But he's like, no, he's like, there's nothing now. He's like, I don't think I would take you as a client. And I was pissed. But over, maybe just the next several months or so, I was like, that dude did me a huge favor.
Yeah,
like, he doesn't
I thought I had.
Yeah, like he had the integrity to be like, you know what? Somebody else probably has better skills for you, or whatever it is, that you plan to accomplish. I don't have that trait. I don't know what it was going on inside his head. He didn't tell me. All he said was, I don't think this would be a good fit. You should probably go find somebody else. But again, so what I'm saying here is to preemptive. If you're walking into an office and you're like, ugh, I don't know if I like this. That's the wrong time to figure that out. Yeah.
Mm. I always tell guys, trust your gut, right? I tell them that with lawyers, and
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
tell them
Yeah.
that
Absolutely. Right.
if you're in that office, whether it's a lawyer, even a regular doctor, a medical doctor, right? Like, I love my medical doctor, who happens to be a woman, by the way, because I know I can say anything to her, and I have, right? She has no judgment. She may joke with me, which she knows me, so that's great, right? And she'll hold me accountable. I would expect the same from a psychologist, psychiatrist, any of those, mental health
Yeah.
counselor, any of them. I have no problem with you
It's
holding me accountable. I have no problem with you busting my balls a little. That's fine. As long as you're genuine, honest, and I know you're hearing me and
yeah.
respecting me. That's
Yeah.
all I can ever ask. And that's what I
Yeah.
tell guys. That's what
I
you
don't.
need to look for.
And you're right. I don't think, it doesn't all have to be formal, in preparation and, doing your homework ahead of time, anything like that. You are absolutely right. If it's a gut feeling, I was thinking, a car salesman, if you walk to a car dealer and the
Yeah.
guy's a sleaze bag, you can figure that out in a matter of
Mm-hmm.
seconds. So
Mm-hmm.
same thing with therapy. Just because they've been in college a lot longer than the car salesman doesn't mean that they're any smarter, any nicer of a person. They're still human beings too. And if they're a sleaze bag and you pick up on it immediately, I don't just say, you know what, I don't think this is going to work. They wouldn't have any problems, telling you to go find somebody else. Don't worry about hurting their feelings. Your life is much more important than that. And if you are having those thoughts, I forget what the context you had put this in just a little bit ago, but if the question is, should I really trust this person? The answer is probably no. And your better alternative is to say, you know what, I could be wrong, but I'm not doing this therapy with this person. I'm going to go find somebody else. There's nothing wrong with saying no and go and finding someone else. The worst, much worse situation is saying, you know what, I don't know if I should be doing this, but I'm going to trust the system, and then getting stuck in with that therapist for the next weeks or months, and it's a
Or
very, very
years.
bad fit, or years, because some of them will let you. Yeah, you'd rather say no right away. Yeah.
I want to switch to something else, but just a quick anecdote I'll share with you is I spoke to a woman roughly this time last year who had been with the same therapist since 1985.
No, you did not.
I did. And I went, what? 40 years of therapy
Wow.
weekly. Do the math on that. And I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't say anything back to her. I was just like,
There's got
dumbfounded.
to be some kind of ethics violation going on there.
I'm
Oh
like,
my, wow.
holy crap. And then, my initial thought was, what the hell's wrong with you? Right. But she's a very nice woman. But
Yeah.
she's like, she was proud of it. Oh, I've been seeing the same therapist since 1985, blah, blah. She went on for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, oh my God. Right. And it was in a
Wow.
social setting. And I certainly wasn't going to put her on the spot, but I wanted to say to her, are you effing kidding me? You should, a year,
I, I,
2 years.
I wonder if that's just some situation where she just needs repeated.
And it could be. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to judge her. I'm judging the therapist more than anything for
Oh
not,
yeah.
So, all right, we have only about 5 minutes left, or actually less than that. But Todd, I want to give you the opportunity to let people know how they can find you. I have tagged you on the description, but where can they find your channels and get your books and all that stuff? Go.
Yeah, absolutely. On YouTube, I started my channel. Dan, I don't know if you noticed this or not. I'm very proud of this. So everyone, my channel is Todd Bottom, just my first last name. So you should be able to find me fairly easy. Just hit 7,000 subs, Dan, just a couple of days ago.
Yay! Good for you.
So I went my
Right.
first six months. I had 900. Now in the last 6 months, I got about 6,000 after that. So things are
Nice.
going great over there. As I mentioned at the start, my content is very psychology, data driven, theory driven, very fact driven. I give out a lot of facts, then I give my commentary in my final points, kind of as it were. I've started being more active now that I no longer am employed full time. I'm starting to get more active on X. So if you have anybody watching is on X, one of the things that would really help me get my content, my message out is follow me on X, because I'm posting my videos as links on there. So just get that push notification, give it a retweet or a forward or something. I'm trying to build some of this stuff organically. So it's what X? Just look for me, Todd Bottom. I think it's my first
I
last
was gonna
name.
say, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm the only Todd Bottom out there.
I don't even know what
So
mine is on this.
yeah, I've had my account for about, gosh, more than 15 years, I think, and I just recently really started using it. But look for me here first on YouTube. Look at my channel. You can find out all of my other contacts from there. But yeah,
So Steve, who's one of our regulars, said, "Tell Todd I was one of the first to subscribe."
Oh,
So he was.
perfect. Thank you. You know
And
what?
then,
I love my longtime viewers.
yeah, and Countryborn was another regular, said, "In case you don't see the comment at the last minute, please tell Todd he did a great job on the show today." Well, there I did. I just did for you. So,
thank you.
and I mean, in all seriousness, and I'm not saying this because he's sitting in front of me on the screen. Go follow Todd. If you like my content, you'll like Todd's. He's a little different than me. He's more factual based, as you just said, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I use his channel as a reference to help me with some of the stuff that I'm doing. So go follow him. It's very educational. I think it's fun. You have a good way of coming across. When you're talking data, that can be very dry. Bueller. I don't think you are. I can't say I watch every video you put out, because if YouTube doesn't show them to me, I don't see them. But I've watched, I'm going to guess, somewhere around 70-80% of them. So I encourage people to go follow you. You'll never see me under the Men Need to Be Heard account doing it. It's on my dummy accounts that I use, because it's just that way I see them. If I use them on my other one, I don't see them as well. So,
right. Yeah, I got you.
The algorithm is the algorithm. But, I just want to wrap it up by saying, Todd, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great discussion. And
my pleasure. Like you said, you and I could talk for hours.
Yeah, we can. I know. And I really hope people will go and follow you. So if you aren't following him, go follow him, subscribe to his channel. It doesn't cost you a dime. Like his videos, blah, blah, blah. Same thing you do for me. And Todd, I hope we can have you back on down the road. Hopefully when Lindsay's back, because I know Lindsay. I
was hoping to meet her. I was hoping to say hi.
Yeah. Well, she went off to Hawaii because she got a surprise trip from her husband, Mr. Squirrely. So how could I tell her, no, you can't go?
Right.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up on that, guys. Great show as always. Don't forget, we are here every Wednesday from 4 to 5:30, and come back next week. We'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.